This meeting to order. Director Somerset, please call the roll. Commissioners, remember to unmute themselves before speaking. Press *6 if on the phone.
Okay. Chair Russell,
Present.
Vice Chair Smith,
Present.
Commissioner Barrios,
Present.
Commissioner Carter,
Present.
Commissioner Doyle. He said he was going to be absent for today's meeting. Commissioner Farren,
Present.
Commissioner Fulcher, present. Commissioner Maka,
Here.
and Commissioner Tellez.
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum.
Thank you. We are hosting this meeting in person and via webinar. We ask all participants to mute your microphone or cell phone if not speaking. So let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. If you are able, please stand for the pledge. Okay. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. I'd now like to welcome all commissioners. Let's go around for a brief introduction if you haven't introduced yourself before. For those on the webinar, please remember to unmute your microphone or phone before speaking. Is there anyone who has not introduced themselves to the group before who would like to? All right, I guess we're good. Are we going to, let's take that part off.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So thank you, commissioners. I would also like to recognize Ms. Allison Bunker from the Attorney General's office. She's filling in for Ms. Rochelle Munson today. Welcome, Ms. Bunker. Thank you. All right, so this is a public meeting and operates under Florida's Government in the Sunshine Act. This meeting is being recorded and all verbal, written, and text. For example, the chat bot. Feedback will be logged within the meeting minutes. For those participating on the webinar or phone, please mute your lines. If you're experiencing technical difficulties, please comment in the chat box and someone from our team will try to address your concern. We advise commissioners on the webinar not to communicate privately via chat bot or box or any other means with other board members in order to ensure discussions remain within the sunshine. So we have a first public comment section. We'll now open the floor for public comment specific to today's agenda items. Please remember comments are limited to agenda items only and should be concise and respectful. I have two.
One for the first part that relates to the meeting materials. I think the other one is for the last part of the public comments.
Okay, so which one's which?
Just one. The one from this one.
Okay. So I will now recognize Ms. Karen Deagle.
Good afternoon. I'm Karen Deagle. I'm the CEO of Senior Resource Association, and we are the CTC for Indian River and Martin counties. I'm here to speak about Agenda Item 7, Innovative Service Development Grant Recommendations. This past legislative session increased the amount in the General Appropriation Act for the FCTD from $3 million to $6 million. This amount of funding allows all proposed budgets to be fully funded with the option to have a future grant opportunity for the additional $1.7 million. I am in support of option number 1 for the Innovative Service Development Grant funding. Again, this option fully funds all current projects at their requested levels. Projects that have already proven their value, are operationally sound, and are serving some of Florida's most vulnerable residents. Partial funding, as proposed in the other options, risks disrupting services, undermining provider stability, and increasing administrative burdens. These grantees earned high scores for a reason. They're effective, efficient, and reliable. Option number 1 not only honors that performance, but also preserves over $1.7 million in funding for new, emerging, or pilot projects later in the year, ensuring we remain responsive and flexible. By choosing option 1, we invest in stability, respect our merit-based process, and keep future innovation on the table. It's fiscally responsible, operationally smart, and strategically balanced. Thank you for your time and thoughtful consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Deagle. So this other one is for later. Okay. So we will now invite other webinar participants to indicate in the chat if they wish to speak. When we call your name, please unmute your mic. If you're experiencing technical difficulties with audio, please submit your comments in the chat and we will read it out loud. Is there anybody in the chat that wishes to speak or in person? Nope, seeing none. Okay, thank you all for your comments. So now we're going to move on to the approval of the March 31st, 2025 meeting minutes. Our next item is the approval of these minutes. Commissioners, you received these in advance. Are there any corrections or comments? There are no objections. May I have a motion to approve the minutes as presented? So moved. Can I get a second?
Second.
All right, so all in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
All, or any opposition? All right, minutes are approved. Thank you. So now we will move to the Community Transportation Coordinator designations. We will now review 7 proposed CTC designations. One of our primary responsibilities is to approve the designation of the Community Transportation Coordinator for each county or multi-county service area in the state. This entity manages and delivers transportation services for the transportation disadvantaged. Key duties include trip coordination, client eligibility, service oversight, compliance reporting, and collaboration with local planning and community partners. This is usually a 5-year designation. Presenters, please provide your summaries. Commissioners, please hold questions until the end of each item. First presenter is Mr. Howard Vansalo, providing a recommendation from the Florida Alabama TPO for Escambia County. Mr. Vansalo?
Good afternoon, board members. Hopefully you can hear me. I was having some difficulties. Thank you for your time. Enclosed in your agenda for consideration is a designation request for Escambia County Board of County Commissioners as the Community Transportation Coordinator for Escambia County Service Area. Escambia County Board of County Commissioners as a government entity is able and willing to continue to provide transportation services. They have been serving in this capacity since 2014 with the experience and qualifications to continue to serve. I am requesting that the board approve the recommendation to designate Escambia County Board of County Commissioners, and I would be glad to answer questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Vansalo. Commissioners, are there any questions for Mr. Vansalo? By the way, if I'm saying your name wrong, please correct me.
You're perfect, Karen.
Thanks. Okay, seeing none, is there a motion to approve the CTC designation for Escambia County?
Commissioner Carter, I'll motion to approve.
Can I get a second?
This is Commissioner
Barrios,
Tellez. I second.
Thank you. All right, so all in favor of approving the CTC designation for Escambia County, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you so much. Next, we have Ms. Summer Jones with the Northeast Florida Regional Planning Council to present the recommendation for Flagler County.
Hello, good afternoon. Can you all hear me good?
Yes.
Okay, so I just wanted to give you all just a brief summary on the redesignation process for Flagler County. So Flagler County Board of County Commissioners are acting as Flagler County Public Transportation, and they have been the CTC since 2004. On January 8th, Flagler County Public Transportation and Flagler County Administration on March 10th notified the Northeast Florida Regional Council that they would like to continue the responsibilities as the CTC. At the February 12th local coordinating board meeting, in support of the continuation of service, the LCB members voted unanimously to recommend that Flagler County BOCC continue its role as the county CTC. At the Northeast Florida Regional Council's April 3rd Executive Committee meeting, the Northeast Florida Regional Council, as a designated official planning agency, unanimously voted to recommend Flagler County BOCC for the redesignation to the CTD. Flagler County Public Transportation has continued to provide access to exemplary transportation services that allow transportation disadvantaged citizens to be able to access daily activities that support independence, health, and their well-being. I ask that you all approve Flagler County BOCC as the county's transportation coordinator.
Thank you. Commissioners, are there any questions for Ms. Jones? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the CTC designation for Flagler County?
Sam Farren will motion.
I get a second.
Commissioner Carter, I'll second.
Thank you. So all in favor of approving the CTC designation for Flagler County, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you so much. Thank you, Ms. Jones. Next is Ms. Mary Beth Ouderstrom with the Heartland Regional Transportation Planning Organization presenting their recommendation for Glades and Hendry counties. Commissioners Glades and Hendry counties is a multi-county single service area. Ms. Soderstrom? We know if she.
She's going to be on here.
Okay. We will
come back.
come back then. Okay, how about Miss Lynn Godfrey with the North Central Florida Regional Planning Council? Do we have Lynn on? Okay. What about Martin County, Miss Lucine Martins from the Martin Metropolitan Planning Organization, presenting the
Hi.
recommendation of Martin County. Oh,
Hi, good afternoon. This is Lucine Martins. I'm going to turn it over to Beth Beltran, the MPO Administrator for Martin County. And here she is. Yes, hi, I'm Beth Beltran. I'm the MPO Administrator for Martin MPO. The Martin County Transit, which is a division of the Senior Resource Association, is the current CTC for Martin County. The Martin MPO is the planning agency for Martin County. On May 12th, the Martin MPO board approved having the Martin County Transit, a division of Senior Resource Association, continue as the community transportation coordinator for Martin County. We did go through before that, we did go through a competitive process working with the county's purchasing division, and it was also approved by the local coordinating board for the transportation disadvantaged. And after that, that's when the MPO board approved having the SRA, or the Martin County Transit, which is a division of SRA, continue as the CTC. We've had a wonderful luck. I mean, they've done a wonderful job in the last 5 years. They have stellar evaluations, and there have been no corrective actions at all during the last 5 years. So I am requesting that they continue as the Martin County CTC. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much. Commissioners, are there any questions for Ms. Martin or Ms. Beltry? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the CTC designation for Martin County?
Motion from Commissioner Micah to approve.
Do we have a second? Commissioner Carter, I'll second. Thank you so much. Okay, so all in favor of approving the CTC designation for Martin County, please say aye.
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 All opposed? Hearing none, thank you so much. Next up is Miss Anyana Morris. She is with the Health Council of South Florida presenting their recommendation for Monroe County.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you so much. So the Health Council of South Florida, as the planning agency for Monroe County, is recommending that the Guidance Care Clinic be designated as the Community Transportation Coordinator, CTC, for Monroe County. Just a little about our process. The Health Council implemented a request for proposals in December of 2024, and only one proposal from the Guidance Care Center was received by the deadline in February. The proposal was individually evaluated and scored by a review committee consisting of members of the Monroe County LCB. The Guidance Care Center received positive scores and comments based on the scoring process. At a publicly noticed LCB meeting held on March 7th, the review committee's decision was discussed with the LCB, which then unanimously approved the selection of the Guidance Care Center. The Guidance Care Center has had excellent evaluations since it began serving as a CTC back in 1997. So they have a lot of experience. Lastly, the Board of Directors at the Health Council of South Florida has also approved this recommendation. Therefore, we are requesting that the Guidance Care Center continue as a CTC for Monroe County for the next 5 years. And I'm happy to answer any questions you all might have.
Thank you, Ms. Morris. Are there any questions for Ms. Morris? Seeing none. Okay, is there a motion to approve the CTC designation for Monroe County?
This is Commissioner Tellez. I make the motion.
Thank you. Can I get a second?
Commissioner Farren will second.
Thank you so much. So all in favor of the CTC designation for Monroe County, please say aye.
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 All opposed? Hearing none. Thank you so much. Thank you, Ms. Morris. Next, we have Mr. Howard Vanselo, again, representing the Florida Alabama TPO with a recommendation for Santa Rosa County.
Hello again, and thank you for your time. Enclosed in your agenda, I'm requesting your approval to designate Tri-County Community Council as the Community Transportation Coordinator for Santa Rosa County. Tri-County is currently the CTC for Santa Rosa County and has been serving in this capacity since 2014. TPO staff issued a request for proposal, and only Tri-County Community Council responded to the RFP and submitted a proposal. The proposal was reviewed and deemed to be complete and responsive, and Tri-County has had excellent reviews during their time there. I am requesting that the board approve the recommendation and designate Tri-County Community Council as the community transportation for Santa Rosa County. I'd be glad to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Any questions for Mr. Vanselo? Okay, is there a motion to approve the CTC designation for Santa Rosa County?
As Commissioner Micah, I recommend approval.
Can I get a second?
Commissioner Barrios, I'll second.
Thank you so much. So all in favor of approving the CTC designation for Santa Rosa County, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Vanselo. I did see in the chat that we have someone here from Heartland Regional Planning Organization.
Sandra.
Yes, I am Heidi Villa. Mary Beth Soderstrom must be stuck in traffic someplace. So I can speak for Hendry County as a CTC. They came on in January of 2021, and they came on as the CTC, and they're running as a CTC in coordination with Glades. So they run as a CTC for both Glades and Hendry. And as they came in, it was more of a real need for these two counties because the CTC for prior had not been doing well at all. So I can say in the time that I've seen them come in and what they have implemented for their transportation disadvantaged service plan and everything, they have really produced what service is needed for both Glades and Hendry counties. And they've really turned the system around, starting from branding. actually naming it to where it's the stream, to where it's actually something that is recognizable to everyone in all of the counties. As I've spoken with people in the counties, anytime that I'm trying to explain who HRTPO is, I can say, well, the stream, the transportation bus, and they're immediately it's brand recognition. So they've definitely done a really great job with that and the service itself. So I definitely want to say that Heartland Regional Transportation Planning Organization does recommend Hendry County to continue as the CTC. Please approve them.
Thank you. Commissioners, are there any questions before Ms. Vila?
As Commissioner Barrios, I do have a question. Since it's for both counties, do they allow them passengers to travel between counties without issue?
Yes, they do. And they actually have a fixed route on top of the paratransit. And that fixed route, actually, you could start in, let's say, Hendry County, and they work so well in coordination, not only with Glades County, but they have actually work with Palm Beach County as well and have coordinated it to where if somebody wanted to, they could start on the fixed route in Hendry, go through and do transfers, the Glades County fixed routes, and then transfer all the way at the end of the route to Palm County and Belle Glades. So by the end of the day, if they started in the morning, they could end up in West Palm Beach if they wanted to, just using fixed route. And I think that is like awesome that people in the area have that as an option. If they want to plan it out, they could take a fixed route all the way and end up in Palm Beach County. And just, they don't have any obligation to coordinate with Palm Beach. They just really want their residents to be able to have transportation options.
I agree. That's phenomenal. Thank you so much.
Any other questions? Is there a motion to approve the CTC designation for Glades and Hendry counties?
Commissioner Barrios, I move to approve.
Can I get a second? Commissioner Carter, I'll second. Thank you. All in favor of the CTC designation for Glades and Hendry counties, please say aye.
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 Any opposition? Hearing none, thank you so much. Do we have anybody from North Central Florida or the other one? Is that it? Okay.
Lynn, maybe she might not be able to unmute her phone.
Hi, I'm here. Can
Oh,
you hear me?
okay. Yes, this
Which slides then? Or Levy County?
Levy County, so it's been Miss Lynn Godfrey with the North Central Florida Regional Planning Council to present the recommendation for Levy County.
Hi, good afternoon, Madam Chair and Commissioners. I apologize. I was having technical difficulty. The North Central Florida Regional Planning Council is recommending that the Levy County Board of County Commissioners be redesignated the Community Transportation Coordinator for Levy County. The local coordinating board did take action and unanimously supported their redesignation. They're doing an excellent job, and we hope they continue.
Thank you,
And
Ms.
I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Ms. Godfrey? Is there a motion to approve the CTC designation for Levy County? Final one, friends.
Motion for Commissioner Micah to approve.
Thank
Sam
you. Can
Farren.
I get a second?
Sam Farren will second.
Thank you, Commissioner Farren. All in favor of the CTC designation for Levy County, please say aye.
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 All opposed? Hearing none, thank you so much. So we are through that section. Now we need to do the emergency community transportation coordinator designations for Franklin and Gulf counties. Next on the agenda is the emergency CTC designation for Franklin and Gulf counties. It is my understanding that on June 13th, the ARC, I think you, acronym ARC, right? ARC of Gulf noticed staff that effective June 30th, they would no longer be able to serve as the community transportation coordinator for Franklin and Gulf counties. Karen informed me and Vice Chair Smith about the situation, and to minimize any disruption in services, promptly began the process of securing an emergency community transportation coordinator. At this time, I'll turn it over to Karen to explain what has taken place and provide any updates. Karen?
Right. Thank you, ma'am. Yes, like ARC did advise us that they're no longer going to be serving. They've been the CTC in Gulf County for probably about 20 years and in Franklin County since about 2016. Situations like this, when there's an early termination or an emergency termination, we do declare an emergency and issue an order so that we can begin that procurement process immediately. We worked with the planning agency staff, with Quentin for the Appalachian Regional Planning Council, and with DOT staff over in District 3, as well as in Tallahassee, to identify an agency that could step in on a quick little notification, short time turnaround to come in and be able to pick up their services as quickly as possible. Big Bend Transit stepped up and said that they would be willing to take this on. They are our current CTC in Gadsden, Jefferson, Madison, and Taylor counties. So they are well equipped to be able to step in and pick up the services. They've been working with the Gulf, with the ARC of the Gulf, trying to transition, provide a smooth transition. They've been working on securing office space within the ARC's building and having a place to have their vehicles stationed there at the facility temporarily. They're working on transferring those titles of the vehicles over, vehicles that are purchased with DOT funding, as well as vehicles purchased with ours. They're transferring those vehicles over to Big Bend so that they can get the insurance and the tags, all the appropriate paperwork to be able to operate starting next week, July 1st. Those drivers and as well as their transportation staff have been given the opportunity to apply for jobs with Big Bend Transit. They're going through that process, making sure all of their paperwork is in order, passing the drug and alcohol testing and the safety, the health inspections, all that type of thing. And let's see what else. They've been contacting the passengers and any of the funding agencies like the senior program and Medicaid brokers to let them know there's a change in the providers. I think that things are going well. There's not been an interruption in service, but there has been a decrease in service just because a lot of those drivers are stepping away from the ARC. Like I said, Big Bend hopes to be able to have those people employed to be able to get started July 1st. So during these type of emergencies, we will designate them for a year. They put a lot of investment into being there. They've got the phone system turned over. They've got, like I said, employees from their offices at the other counties to go down to Gulf and to get things set up, Franklin. So we've allowed that designation to be for a year, letting the planning agency go through more of a formal procurement process. So then we'll be back within a year for their recommendation for a more permanent CTC. I think that covers everything. Are there any questions?
Hi, this is Commissioner Barris. I'm just curious.
Yeah.
I just wondered how were the riders informed of the change?
My understanding is that as they've been calling in to make their trip reservations or trip requests, they've been told that there'll be a change. There's also been signs posted on the vehicles that there's been change. There has also been the commissioner, I believe, in Franklin County posted on his Facebook that there was changing. The ARC has also posted on their Facebook account that the transportation services are changing over to Big Bend. I think they've tried to do as much as they can outreach to letting everybody know.
Sure, thank you.
Uh-huh.
I have a question.
Yeah.
With formal procurement in a year from now, have we ever run into instances where the new provider or the procured provider is different from the one that was working in intro?
Have situations, yes, but that has happened. Down in the when we had Goodwills, the Glades, Henry Lee, DeSoto, they had an emergency a couple of years ago. Lee stepped up, took that county, but then Henry Glades stepped up and took their counties. The emergency provider was NB, I believe it was at that time. So yes.
Any other questions for Karen? This is not an item we need to vote on either, right?
No, ma'am.
Okay,
Just more of information, but I thought we'd share it with everybody.
thank you. Okay, so now moving on to our next item, fiscal year 25-26 Shirley Conroy Rural Area Capital Assistance Grant Recommendations. Our next action item is to approve funding for capital equipment projects under the Shirley Conroy Grant Program for fiscal year 25-26. Director Somerset will provide an overview of the program and projects recommended for funding this year. Karen?
Okay. So as the package says, DOT authorizes $1.4 million each year to be transferred over to the Transportation Disadvantaged Trust Fund to support the purchase of capital equipment in rural areas. The packages were sent out to our CTCs on March the 10th with a due date of April the 30th. We received 20 applications requesting over $3 million worth of funding. There were 18 vehicles requested, and 2 of the requests were for software or additional software modules added to their programs. We met with DOT Central Office staff on May the 22nd, went through the applications and finalized the recommendations that are in your package. The vehicle recommendations were based on the age and the mileage of the vehicles that were being proposed to be replaced. And then also in conferring with DOT staff, they were sharing with us what vehicles that they had recently approved for those organizations through their own programs that they have for funding capital equipment. So vehicles are generally purchased through either the DOT state contracts, list of vendors that they buy that have already passed all of those safety requirements and equipment requirements. Either that or they are purchased off of the Department of General Services contract with vehicles. We don't let them buy just from any dealer that they want to. They have to make sure they go through that some type of a procurement, governmentally procured process. All of our equipment has to be purchased by June the 30th. Because we operate on a zero-based budget, we can't extend those contracts. And so a lot of the vendors, especially the DOT supported vendors, help us through that, and they prioritize these requests first in trying to fulfill the vehicle orders so that they can have those before June 30th. That's all I have. Do we want to go through them? Do you guys have any questions on any of them?
I have 2 questions. So
Yes.
first so you said they have to be procured by the 30th. So are all of these already in the process, or how are they going to?
Now, as soon as we advise them that the commission has approved their applications, then they'll put their orders in with those vendors.
So it's just the order has to be in, it doesn't actually have to be.
Oh, it has to be they have to have, the way our process goes is they have to purchase the vehicle. They send an invoice showing it's been paid to that vendor, and then we reimburse the CTC 90% of the cost. Or
Okay, so then so have these have already been purchased then?
no. The order will be placed
Soon
as we approve that.
Okay.
Yeah, the recommendation.
And then second question, do they compare these costs to each other or the private sector? Like, how are we monitoring that this is the cost, this is what it should cost?
They have this as part of their application process. They have to submit to us their tentative order that they would be submitting to the vendor that shows what equipment they selected and to support the costs that they're proposing to apply for.
Being selected from a DOT and state already approved
Vetted vendor.
Okay.
The prices have already been negotiated with those vendors through DOT's process.
Do you all do any checks then to see if they're charging the private sector less for the same thing with these vendors?
So as it goes through that process, and I can get you more information from that too, from Gabe, who's here with us as well too, our transit manager for the state, who that area oversees what we're looking into for that one. But we can certainly get those answers out to you.
A lot of times there's more equipment on those vehicles than the general public would purchase
Okay, so it's not
with.
apples to apples, correct?
No,
Okay.
like first aid kits, fire extinguishers, sometimes cameras, software equipment's already installed, things like that, safety equipment.
Understood. Okay. Anyone else, any other questions?
Wish we had enough money to, award them all, but we got to pick and choose.
Okay, so is there, at this time, is there a motion to approve funding for the recommended projects?
Motion to approve from Commissioner Micah.
A
Second?
second by Commissioner Tellez.
So all in favor, for approving the funding for the recommended projects for the Shirley Conroy Rural Area Capital Assistance Grant, please say aye.
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 Opposition? Thank you so much. All right, so next item on the agenda is the fiscal year 25-26 Innovative Service Development Grant recommendations. Next, we'll review the funding recommendations for the Innovative Service Development Grants. Karen, could you please present?
Madam Chair, this is Commissioner Micah. Could I interject before we get started on this one?
Sure.
So my county has an application for this grant, and so I will be recusing myself from the vote.
Understood. From the entirety of the vote, or do we want to do that one separate?
That's.
I would like you to be able to, because there's many on here, and there may be individual discussions about individual ones, so I don't want you to recuse yourself.
Yeah, I would defer to the legal counsel, but I think I'm most comfortable not voting at all because we are in competition with the other applicants. So
Yeah,
I
okay.
think it would just be to avoid that appearance of conflict. I think I just shouldn't vote on any of them.
Smart. Do we still have quorum though without that, right?
Yes.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay.
Yes. Good question. 7, 8, yes. We have 8 in attendance, so 7's a quorum.
7? Okay. All right. Nobody can leave. All right, so Karen, will you please provide an overview of the projects and funding options?
Sure. Okay, remember the ISD program is a competitive grant. It's for CTCs, agencies, to test new and innovative ways of providing services to the TD ridership. The projects have to support at least one of the objectives. It's to increase the rider's access to employment, medical, education, life, other sustaining activities, or cross-county or regional mobility enhancements, or reduce barriers to TD riders to accessing fixed route services. Projects are capped at $750,000 for a single service area and $1.5 million for a multi or regional area project. This year, in proviso, the appropriations bill includes $6 million for the ISD program. This is a $3 million increase compared to where we have this year's projects. This year we were funded at $3 million. Again, this funding is through proviso language. This year, the proviso language also will open up the application eligibility to include non-traditional transportation service providers. So when we sent out the initial application package, this language wasn't known yet. So we received applications from our CTCs. Of course, everything is contingent upon the governor's approval of the budget, which we hope will be next week, right? So based on that, if that goes through, then we'll be sending out a second package so that non-traditional providers can apply as well as other CTCs. We sent the packages out on March the 17th, and they were due by May the 12th. We also did a virtual workshop on March the 27th, where we went through the application process, allowing any applicants to ask any questions. We also provided applicants an opportunity to submit their applications early so that we could give them feedback to help them with their applications. And 9 of those applicants took advantage of that opportunity. We received 9 applications total, requesting a little over $4.3 million this time. 8 of the applications are for current projects that we're funding. and one was for a new project. We evaluated the applications using the scoring rubric, and one of the applications did not fully address or complete all of the required sections. So at this time, we're not recommending that they be considered, but we encourage them to apply if we do have a second round. For the second time, I won't go through each of the projects unless you have specific questions on any of them. And then also included in the package is recommendation of funding options, so you all can decide on which way you want to go. We can go through those as well. Quick overview.
Okay, so I want to make sure do we have anybody that wanted to speak on this? I just want to make sure we're not missing people who.
I know Karen Deagle did, but I haven't received any other requests for public comments. If you want to open it up, if there's anybody else.
Is there anybody else who wanted to speak on this topic? This other one.
That one's for at the end, we do another public comment.
Just for the general.
Okay, general conversation.
Okay, seeing none. Does anyone have any questions on the scoring rubric, any of the individual applications? Start with questions, or let's open it up for questions and or comments. Any questions and or comments from any of the commissioners on the requests?
I have a question. So in looking at this and with the amount that is appropriated or will be appropriated, does that mean that at this time, or hopefully by July 1, we will have the ability to fund these at the full amount, which was option 1 on this chart? And then the additional applications that we would have them be able to submit would be for the additional funding that if it was over what we were anticipating.
Yes. That's the thought.
Thank you.
That's a little confusing.
So did you want to go through the different options, or do we want which options? So these were options provided by staff as options. So
Yes.
these are not, you're not limited to any of these, but
No.
this was,
Someplace to start.
yes.
Yes, ma'am. Yes. Okay. Option 1 obviously is 100% of all of the requests minus Hernandez, because Hernandez was the one that we were comfortable with at this time. Option 2 is funding all of them.
Sorry, Karen, I didn't hear what you said about Hernando.
Okay, Hernandez application was the one that we felt wasn't complete.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Okay, we're not recommending that one at this time, but they certainly can apply the second go.
Okay.
Okay. Option 2 is funding all of them 100% except for SRAs, because SRA was the one that would be going into the 5th year. Remember at the last commission meeting? Prior to last commission meeting, the commission had voted to limit the projects to 4 years. This last meeting in December, we suspended that policy with the consideration that all the current projects would be given priority consideration, and then Senior Resources project would be considered afterwards. Since it's a 5th year, so we were going 100% with all the current ones, except for SRAs where we proposed 80%. And then the third one was based more on the scoring. So the ones that scored between 540 and 550, 540, which is Bay County. No, I'm reading upside down. I'm sorry. The ones that scored higher than 550, PSTA, we'll call it, and SRA Martin were 100%. Scores between 540, 550, 540. Bay County and the Guidance Care Center for Monroe County were at 90%. MTM and Star Metro were awarded 80%. Their scores were between 518 and 592, or 492, I'm sorry. And then Indian River at 75%, since that was the 5th year. That make clear as mud.
So if I can, for a comment on this one too, with the funding that's come into it, I think it's great that there is an option and availability to fund at 100% for what has come into, to use those dollars to fund what's come. And then it appears as though if we did do that with option one, there would be a remaining balance of 0.8 as well too. And like you said, there could be a second round that could come out to that. And where potentially Hernando, if they were to resubmit or come into it, it appears that's sufficient if they were scored high enough and came into all the eligibility that came to it to potentially fund that one as well too, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Karen, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you tell me again why the 80% for Indian River, St. Lucie? Because it's the 5th year?
Yes, ma'am. You know, we were talking about kind of transitioning down out of funding instead of increasing the funding was one of the thoughts. That and it being the 5th year.
They are the ones that scored the highest, correct?
Correct. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I would agree with option one personally. I just think everybody would, if you have the money, everybody should have the opportunity. My opinion.
On the, Commissioner Fulcher, on the bidders who were continuing, were they required to add new innovations or were they allowed to continue existing innovations?
Continuing existing.
Did any of them add new ones on?
Some of them did, and it was mentioned in the descriptions if there were some changes, like they may have added an additional, opened up a little earlier or added another. I think like the Monroe, they're going to do an extra day to Miami under the project. Some of them, I think Wakulla, they have opened it up to other riders, expanded it to additional riders.
So the Indian River, St. Lucie, they added, is the mobile app new?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so how do we want to, so it sounds like we have at least two people who are voting for option one, but I don't want to make assumptions. Commissioner Tellez, you were clear, but is that your, are you recommending option one?
Should there be a motion for it? I would.
I don't know.
I can second it.
I'm not,
Yes.
make sure.
I'll motion for option one.
Motion for option one?
I'll second. Commissioner
Okay.
Dewan?
So do we want to vote on option one or actually let's, are there any objections to option one? Just want to make sure we recognize. Okay, so we're moving forward with option one. So all commissioners in favor of fully funding all of the projects that applied this go around, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, option one it is, and we will discuss upon budget signing what we can do next.
I'm sorry. Can I make a clarification on that?
Sure.
We wouldn't be giving it to everyone who applied.
Oh, I'm
but
sorry.
Who applied
Yes.
and completed.
All who had complete applications. And Hernando is eligible if we do receive the funding to, and we are able to open up a second round of funding. If they are complete, they would be eligible again. So they're not. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Okay.
Just as a follow-up on that, we will be updating the manual to include additional information for those non-standard transportation provider requirements. So, and we'll be sending that out, putting it in the, probably advertising it in the Florida Administrative Register. So it can reach out to other people, posting it on our website, and so that others will know about the potential funding opportunity. I was going to ask you all, in the past, we've done like presentations from these projects to the commission. Would you all like that as a part of our upcoming commission meetings in September or December, or do you want to schedule something different besides the commission meetings? If you wanted to learn more about the projects or ask them any questions? Kind of a workshop.
I actually really would like a presentation on the, at a minimum, the one that's happening, the Star Metro one. That sounded interesting when I read it.
We can schedule.
I don't think we should do them all in the same meeting.
No. Probably a
So
lot.
yeah, we can spread them I
Couple of them.
I would find that interesting,
Okay.
but I'm one person, so.
Feeling of the group?
I found them very useful when I was newer to the board. As an advisor, it helped me learn. So, I mean, I think it's a good idea, but it does need to be spread out.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Very well.
I would be
Yes.
very interested in hearing from the entities that we're funding. I think that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Right.
All right, so moving on to the next agenda item, the Transportation Services Survey of State Agencies. So as discussed during our last meeting, Vice Chair Smith proposed conducting a survey to understand why agencies use certain programs, whether they are required, and how eligibility requirements can be streamlined. Vice Chair Smith will now brief us on the preliminary findings of FDOT's survey. Vice Chair Smith?
Thank you. Yes, and luckily we do have a presentation to come along with it today, so it was up there.
No, that was just cover page. I
Just the cover.
There you go.
There it is. So yes, as we recall, and thank you for that too, at our most recent meeting, FDOT, we were directed to start taking steps to look deeper into the different services that are provided across the state agencies, the eligibility, the funding, and how those various ones interact for human services transportation. So you can go to the next slide. So as a refresher on that context of how we got here for it, again, there was a legislative study that FDOT was directed to conduct on TD services and prepare that report for the governor and legislature. FDOT presented that study and the results to the Senate committee in January. And then we also provided a current assessment of that to this body in March. And that's where we're getting to today as well for where we can do to it. So what we did with that study is we identified key challenges and opportunities in administering the program and then evaluating alternative formats for delivery of service. What we're hoping to do and what we've all talked about in this as well too is how do we streamline the programs and create efficiencies and improving the customer service experience, which we've heard some great things today. It sounds like of how outside and individually we're trying to create those customer service experience and enhance them. So how do we do that further as a body for this one? So today I'll walk you through what we've found so far in some of our state agency surveys, like was said on that one too. So if we go to the next slide, and I'll walk through it slowly, but after this one, there's going to be an interesting slide as well too. So bear with me as we walk through what's on those. So when we last met, we discussed the need for developing that deeper understanding of funding streams and client eligibilities. Our goal was to optimize federal and state funding that's available for it. So what we did was we began researching the agency programs that provide human service transportation services to understand those requirements, the funding sources, the client eligibility, and the trip purpose. The information was requested via survey to our state agencies that provide TD services. And what you see here is 3 of those 5 agencies surveyed and some of the responses that come along with it. Specifically, here's your Department of Elder Affairs and our Agency for Persons with Disabilities. So in this example, we're showing those 3 programs, Department of Elder Affairs Alzheimer Initiative and Community Care for the Elderly, and then also the Agency for Persons with Disabilities I-Budget Waiver Program. Displayed are the eligibility criteria, the eligible trip purposes for each program. And as you can see, and as we all know, there are some similarities in these criteria and trip purposes. Each program has age requirements that you'll see in that first column and specific disabilities. So Alzheimer's disease, functional disabilities, and developmental disabilities respectively to be eligible for these programs. And then you'll see that the trip purposes for these programs vary, but with all 3 providing trips for education, training, and personal errands. So the next one is where it gets interesting as well too for our visual that like to see the pictures of this one. So as we've identified before, it is a complex system that comes into it. And again, this is just a slight piece of what we're all looking at and how we're trying to kind of fix those chains of how it's coming into it for programs. So I love this visual of it. Let me help you walk through it because it took me a little bit as well too as it came into it. So identifying the program gaps and overlaps is what we tried to do. And this is the interesting graphic that really shows the complexity, as you can tell, of our overall system. So to walk through it, the program overlaps were mostly found for the elderly and children, as there are multiple programs that assist these rider groups. And if we take a closer look at these overlaps for the elderly programs, you'll see the large bubble in the middle. That big one in the middle, that's our age group. That's our 60+ age criteria. Each of the smaller surrounding bubbles represent additional criteria. So where the large bubble intersects with the smaller, you'll see the name of the program. So let's take a look at an example. On the lower right-hand side of the slide, you see an orange bubble that represents a functional disability as the additional criteria to being 60+. Where the 60+ bubble overlaps the functional disability bubble, we see the program community care for the elderly. So what that tells us is that if you're over 60 and you have a functional disability, you're eligible for the community care for the elderly program. The trip purposes associated with that program are medical, counseling, therapy, adult daycare, education training, and shopping. You see that represented by the icons. It takes a second for like it took me. So yes, but it's a great representation, I think, this all to you. So shifting focus to the larger bubble above, it's showing us that if you are over 60, have Alzheimer's or a severe disability that requires a caregiver, you are eligible for 2 programs, the Alzheimer Initiative Program and or the Older Americans Act. The Alzheimer Initiative Program can provide trips for medical, adult daycare, education training, nutrition, and shopping, while the Older Americans can only provide trips for medical, adult daycare, and shopping. So those who have Alzheimer's and are eligible for both programs, while someone who has a severe disability and caregiver but not Alzheimer's is only eligible for the Older Americans Act. Second thing I want to point out are the highlighted numbers 1 through 5. So you're probably wondering about those as well too. Overlaps 1 and 2 show the relationship we discussed in the previous slide where a client with Alzheimer's can be considered to have a functional disability. That's an overlap 1. The same can be said for a visually impaired rider. They can also be considered to have a functional disability. That's an overlap 2 that comes into the programs. And then overlaps 3 through 5 show scenarios where a rider meets more than 1 eligibility criteria. Overlap 3 shows a rider who is visually impaired and has Alzheimer's disease or another severe disability requiring a caregiver. Overlap 4 shows a rider who is visually impaired and low income. And overlap 5 shows a rider who is low income and age 55+ and unemployed. So we're starting to see how there's the different ways that they can come into it. We see from this the dual eligibilities that add the complexity that we all are aware and know of, but are also helpful in providing more trip opportunities for riders. So it's a good thing to have, but it's a complex that adds to the system. So overall, it's beneficial when a rider can qualify for more than 1 program. It's understanding how to get them to those right programs. So next slide.
But all of these are separate and apart from what we do. This is
Correct.
completely outside of our, okay.
So those are programs, and then finding those gaps, what comes into it, or how it's the last resort coming down to TD services of how we can do those. So multiple programs that are available out there and statewide that our clients go to, and then eventually would come to TD to fill as well that comes into it. But it's how do we trickle into those to make it the best customer focused of how we're finding those. So program gaps that we were looking at too. So after identifying the overlaps of that 1 slide, we looked for program gaps. And the good news is that there aren't any widespread gaps that's coming into this, which we knew. With all the overlaps that are happening, we would hope that there aren't any gaps. So the majority were found for non-elderly who were not considered low income. So essentially healthy adults who would not be considered of the most vulnerable populations that come into it. So for specific trip purposes with an eligible group, examples include nutrition trips for children under DCF reports or supervision, as well as nutrition and shopping for low income and nutrition for non-elderly. And then fortunately, to your point, Chair, this is where TD Commission comes in and covers those trips that come into it. So any of those gaps would fall down. And those are essentially the larger ones that we had found into it. So nothing widespread. We're still captured in that. And that's why TD Services is here to come into it to fill those holes. So that's what's bringing up some of the questions that we've all had as part of that report and as part of this commission is where can we best optimize the funding of the trips through these various programs, ensure that any gaps are covered, which they're into it, and then supporting that customer focused approach of how do we get our riders. You'll see there's 12 programs, for instance, for one. How do we make sure that those eligible are getting to the right program?
So is there anything that we have within our oversight that they don't already have somewhere else? Is there any population or group that
So for example, as I mentioned in that one, so the children at the top, you see the X, they don't provide nutrition in those or the shopping for those, but TD services would cover trips for those. Those
Children who need shopping?
to go, yes,
Okay.
certain personal trips that would come into it. It's not an eligible trip under those programs.
So give me an example of a child who would need to go shopping. Would we cover somebody who was in DCF's care or something like that, or is that covered by another program?
So what we were talking about on that one too was the example of one who was in DCF care potentially, or court supervision, depending on age, which falls in this one. Those would not be considered as an eligible trip under some programs.
For the other
Correct.
entities. So DCF doesn't have something.
They have things, they just don't cover that specific type
Got it. Okay.
where TD falls into to cover for it. Open to any discussions from agencies as well too, to speak more to that, however.
I have, so, and I'm not, I know a lot of programs for elder affairs, but I do not know every single one of them. As far as like the specifics.
Right.
So what my understanding of this is there are requirements for, because these programs like the Title III-E, the Title III-D, that's all administered through the area agency on aging or the area disability resource centers. They are required to utilize CTCs. I want to make sure that in the analysis that was also taken into account, because the regular CTC services that are out there that are being funded through the commission, not necessarily like the Innovative Service Development Grant or, but that was accounted for. So even though they have their own funding, they're paying for those trips through that funding, it's still coming back to this commission.
In the CTCs. Yeah. I think she's more focusing on the TD dollars or TD trust fund.
It's the full picture of that, of how it comes into it. Because to your point, it's a complex. All the programs that are within different divisions, different areas that come into it that have different streams tied to them as well too, from both the federal and the state and a local standpoint of how to do that. And it's what we were trying to do as well is just how do we untangle some of that? Is there a way to start identifying it? And we started it with this initial survey from that one too to get some of it, but there's been challenges of looking through that as well too, to make sure that we capture everything appropriately. So initial.
The only time that they're not held, and it's basically, so like the community care for the elderly, CCE, that's a department run program through the AAAs, but it's a department's program. Same with HCE, home care for the elderly. The OAA programs, the Older Americans Act programs, I think the only time that it's not required to use CTC would be if there wasn't a provider in that area to provide those services. So maybe we can look in the way of gaps there also.
Right.
Okay. Where are those at?
Love discussion, by the way, of any way that we can start bringing that into it. And so, yes, after looking at this one, if we go to the next slide, how do we develop or how do we look at or how do we determine how to get people where they need to be appropriately? This is very much just a theoretical, what could we look like of how it comes into it. Everything's going to have its challenge and we're all going to have to talk through it. But with the ultimate goal of streamlining a process, how do we determine who goes to what and how do we get it to where the customer doesn't have to figure out who to go to, of who they're calling? Are they calling AAA? Are they who is it that they have to contact to get into it? Not an easy process to get to, but maybe an ultimate goal of making it somewhat streamlined for those. So what you see here on it is a tree matrix that would help potential writers and programs to fund those various needs. So this one's being accomplished through a yes, no, that would guide users through a screening process when trips are requested. Again, this was one way that we kind of helped ourselves look at the data. It's nothing that's out there, but it's something that kind of helped us go through it of how do you decide to come in or to not to. So this isn't something that a customer or a writer would actually have to go through, but it would be a back end of how do we as a state look at it to see how they're being funded and what decision trees are coming into it. So as you see that in the example, this one, it was a call requesting an employment trip. So the writer would go through a series of yes, no questions until they reach a program to fund their trip, or they find that there is no program available to fund the trip, which then takes you to TD services on this one. So again, it ends here, but it's how do you find the programs that you are eligible for? And is there a way that we should look at how to get them there quicker, and then how to best utilize and optimize the funding that's coming behind those, of cascading into a trip, so that it is ultimately TD dollars being that last trip, that last resort of trip dollars to come into it, and making sure we're optimizing all the dollars that are available for other programs that come into it. Is a thought for.
Standardized assessment among all programs, so one assessment determines where you go, what program's eligible for.
Correct. And then how do we, if wanted, how is that a way to streamline those eligibilities? How do you create a decision tree like that that could potentially be running in the background so that it's a one-stop, very customer-focused approach of, I need to have an employment trip, not having to say, I will call here or try here or have you try here, but here it is. These are the ones that you can come into, and then these are the local providers that would allow for that trip to come into it. Not, it seems simple, not simple, understanding it's not coming into that one, but starting with that untangling of the web, if you will, is what we're trying to start on this one too.
And you may, when you get more into it, wonder
Yeah.
what a few case studies, or a couple from Elder, a couple from APD. And I think, to echo what Commissioner Carter said, I do think some of our programs will, it's kind of a backwards. It'll say, oh, you have to do TD commission first. And then you're saying you have to do the other program first. So we have to figure out where that friction is.
And I love that you said that, because you're correct. It's been one of those of who truly is that last resort that comes into it, because there has been some friction points of that as well too. And that actually leads great into the next slide as well too, of what do we do then to come into it, to move forward? This, because we need to be talking to more agencies, digging more into those weeds. Does that look like a CTD working group so that we can really get into some of those weedy issues? And what does that mean? How does it go to? Why is the requirement like this? What's the ultimate authority that requires that type to come into it? Is what we're thinking about that one, knowing that now is the time that we could reset some of those program requirements to come into it, or at least look towards how would we do that, again, to optimize funding, to optimize the customer experience as well too, and just to streamline that as best we can across the system that comes into it. And we are happy to continue working on that one as the commission comes into it, or ways to look forward on doing those. So that is where we are now. And again, that was a small selection of what we were able to do in this interim time. But I think that one visual does give a good picture of how complex it is. And I think that's the best way that I've seen it so far. It helps me really understand those different overlaps and gaps is what I had kind of charged for to identify in both of those. Lots of overlaps, which is great. Minimum gaps, which is also great. But then now how can we streamline that a little bit more to optimize the funding and to also optimize the customer experience behind this?
Yeah, and I think I like that there was no or minimum gaps, but I do know when we're hearing from our stakeholders, they're saying something different. So we want to really figure out where that is. And then also, and I think you kind of said this, but our writers, they don't care who's paying for it. They just want to know,
how do I get there?
Yeah.
I believe this would need to be a much larger conversation with the stakeholders, the agencies that are providing the services, to figure out why they're operating the way they are, what their interpretation is. And I would also recommend any work group that comes together that maybe that happens after October.
Hi, this is Commissioner Barrios. I'm sorry, I have a question. So kind of back to the comment, what riders don't care who's paying for the trip. Definitely true. However, as a rider, I will say that sometimes we have to know, because of the different applications and re-registration requirements, which often aren't clear. Is this something that that was kind of looked at or will be, or we're considering looking at?
So what I heard on that is that, yes, sometimes it comes to it as a writer does need to know at certain times where to go to for what, which is, yes, that is true. I don't know in the end of it, whether or not it's an overarching why have to come to there, and why should that question be there for a writer? Why, we need to simplify it as best we can for that too, of who you're going to. Why do you have to know about 3 different programs for one thing? Is that the most efficient way to be doing it to get you where you need to go? Because your time is
Right.
valuable as well too.
Absolutely. And if you, in theory, you know, in my mind, if you qualify for one because of a certain disability, and that disability or situation is covered by another program, why should you have to reestablish, right? Again, this is my disability, this is my situation. And then beyond that, the communication requirements, if there are any, for the providers, primarily because I've seen in the past where there have been service changes where certain rides were no longer supported by certain programs, and the riders were not informed properly. So those are just some thoughts.
And great thoughts. And I think I'd add on to that one too, of sometimes in the different buckets of it, sometimes one program runs short on dollars at any point in time in a year. So that's where the overlaps are beneficial, because yes, maybe that program has run short on their dollars, but you have an overlap of another program that you can go to. So it's one of those of how do you then spill over to that other program and hope that they have dollars as well to utilize those before it spills down into the TD services as well too. Kind of what is the true last resort trip on this one, and finding an ultimate decision, if you will, on that one when it comes to, but then also making sure that they know where to go to for those. Because yes, you may qualify for 3, but should you have to call all 3 and ask through it? That's not the customer experience that I think the state's looking for to get to, but how do we ultimately achieve a goal better?
Something big picture that may not be achievable anytime in the near future, but with an overarching assessment system, it'd be nice if there was a system in place where all providers use this system, and then an automatic recommendation or application went to the provider that had the most funding available at that time. So you're not actually having to provide these 3 different programs to the client to figure out for themselves. We're actually going through that process for them. And then if there's an issue, we can easily transfer all information to the next provider. So that way they're not having to do the application for 3 times.
There are many streamlined application eligibility systems available. It would require all of our partners to jump on board to do this collectively, but it could also aid in prioritization in that, you know, we do have many of these that have dual eligibility, but one person earlier in the year may qualify for 10 of them. If you could find that then with these, this is all now very enabled with technology, to charge it to the one that gets used the least so that you save more and the one that gets used more often. And it would just be, it's all data.
Which could be programmed on the back end. I think that's what we're talking about.
This would be
too.
seamless for the individual.
Exactly.
They would have no.
Which would be, and it's again, lengthy process, ultimate goals to come to it, but steps being towards that process. And it would take all partners coming together to talk and continue to talk about how can we do that. And then programming on the back end of that one too, to where it is seamless to the customer.
It'd have to be more than what is just here. Yeah, represented in this room. I can tell you that most of those programs for the Department of Elder Affairs require an assessment process that starts at the Department of Elder Affairs, goes through the AAAs, then goes to the Department of Children and Families, and ends with ACA. So, and in that process, most of those programs, you are required to have a certain score on an assessment that they're required to do by law. So there are a lot of different steps and a lot of people will be involved in that.
Where do we go from here? This is,
I think there's a question.
sorry.
Yes, I have a bit of a question and then a bit of a comment. So my question was, on that first slide that you had, like all the different eligibility, like all of the different age groups that on there were eligible for medical under some kind of medical program. And I was just wondering, which program primarily that was under there. Is it the managed care plans, the Medicaid plans that they have transportation available? That's the primary program, or is there multiple programs? But that was the one, not the bubbles, but the next one.
The next,
Yeah, where it shows all of them that they would have some kind of program where they could get their medical trips. I was wondering, is that mainly managed care through Medicaid?
I would have to look more into where that is. This is more of that overarching high level as to the types they can come to in the different programs. But
Okay.
it's broken out into which identifies those projects for this one.
Well, and the reason I was asking that is because I've recently done a little bit of research study on what exactly they provide for medical transportation for all of the Medicaid managed care plans. And every single one of them, it's 6 trips maximum per year. So that doesn't give them like all their medical trips that they're going to need for the entire year. So how our CTC, who does not provide Medicaid managed care trips, they're not a contractor for that, how they have learned to deal with that is to just ask their riders to first use all of those trips. And as soon as they've been told that they've exhausted all of their trips for the year, then they're eligible for the TD at that time. Now, some folks who've never been riders of the system before have more of a hiccup on that. So in 2021, CFRPC, which is above our HRTPO, RTPO, actually created a hotline for the riders to call into and a website where they can do what you said, answer some basic questions. They're a resident, they're over 60, they're ambulatory, they're not ambulatory. And then it comes up with a list of all of the different areas, all of the different transportation options in their area, starting with the CTC first, then going to the other ones that they might actually be qualified for as well. But it actually gives them more than one place to look. And then a lot of times, if CTC says, we're not exactly sure if you're eligible, we need some other things and it's more complex, they refer them to the hotline. And the hotline, they get to a person that can help them through the more complex things of, oh, you've already got a qualification letter for over here, and just kind of step them through because it is complex. And sometimes we found they need that touch of having someone that will talk to them a little bit longer than the reservation or the scheduler at the CTC, because they are trying to meet a performance measurement of not keeping people on the phone very long, because they usually have a performance measurement of a hold time of only 3 minutes. So just to give you guys some feedback, there are some CTCs out there working with their TPOs and their regional planning councils to attack it more as a mobility management issue versus TD trying to fix everything. Basically, mobility management, getting those agencies to talk to each other and approve. Oh, you got a letter from this agency that says that you've been approved on income. That approval letter will work over here for the CTC. They will accept that. The only problem that my mobility manager has come across consistently is folks who have never had to use social programs before don't realize the importance of keeping their papers and their approval letters. So a lot of times they will have to ask for them a second time.
So it sounds like there are examples of this working better, like in the field. Can we get someone from like a good example to come talk about how they do this?
And maybe how they're starting to, because I think it is starting to, in areas, trying to self-solve for what's happening here and how to be more customer focused, but they're in the little pockets of it too. But to your point, if we could have someone that could maybe show us what they're doing and what they're learning from it, and then seeing if that's a best practice or something that could grow as well.
In the meantime, with these managed care plans, these individuals have caseworkers. So while they're telling them how many trips they have, they should also be helping them on the back end to figure out where they can go for services. So, in instances like that, and I'm not sure how that's reported, but I mean, it's their responsibility contractually to provide those services. So we want to make sure that those managed care plans are also assisting clients in the application process and in the process of finding the right transportation services. And that can be drawn into the bigger picture as well.
Hey, this is Samantha Farron. Yeah, there's a lot that we do to work with ACA on that, both from providing trips for covered services for the medical appointments. And then every managed care plan has NEMT benefits, non-emergency medical transportation, as well as other types of transportation services that are available. And so as the case managers, and other various folks within the plans, and obviously every plan is run a little differently. There are definitely pathways and different ways we're connecting our members back into the community above and beyond just the services that we are contractually mandated to provide.
And then there's Medicare.
Right.
And then they have a whole nother broker structure as well.
Yep.
Yes. Yeah, to see if there's some
Well,
agencies.
this Commissioner Barris again, sorry, just to kind of interject just a little bit, because I know, I understand the thought process that, hey, TD shouldn't just, come and try to fix everything, but I think at least some guidelines or some, something should definitely go into this, because I think even for simple things, forgetting HMOs and Medicare, which yes are complicated and people would definitely need help with that. I think just a simple thing like, all right, you are eligible for CTC and you're eligible for whatever the, for example in Tallahassee, dial a ride, right? You're eligible for both of these things, but there are, for whatever reason, there are different requirements to apply or to reapply. And I think it wouldn't hurt to take a look at it at least.
And to Commissioner Barris's point, I think that's another area that's kind of got some overlapping, if you will, on that, the human service transportation needs and then the general public transportation services. That can be very confusing to riders, especially living in urbanized areas. Where do they go for those type of trips? So something else. We might want to take baby steps and start out with the human service agencies, since those are individuals we can work with agency-wise. Look at the bigger picture. That would be something to put out there as part of this.
Okay, so I would like to keep this going. So thank you for doing all of this. I think that was really helpful for me. See all the offerings. I think this is we're just like starting at the top.
It is, yes.
And so I do think that we see put some next steps on here. Okay.
Back to a couple of slides.
So what would we
Backwards, one more. Backwards, one more. No, backwards, we're going forwards.
How far?
I'm sorry, in Melissa's presentation.
Oh, back to, okay, let me get it again.
It's okay. We can move forward. So what next steps do we want to take here? Because I don't want this to die in the vine. I think this is the type of work and items we need to be looking at and figuring out ways to address. So personally, I would love to hear from some of the local entities that are self-solving, just to see how they're doing it and what they're having to do this. And I'm assuming a lot of that also involves like workarounds and other stuff and things we have to overcome. So maybe we can find some of those and barriers we can eliminate potentially, kind of easier to make this easier, but I would love that. So Karen, will you please I'd love one from a big urban area as well as more of a rural one, just so we can see maybe how they intersect too with multiple transportation options, if that exists.
Okay.
So that's my request for how to move this forward. I don't know if others have additional
We have an area agency right here in Leon County, Area Agency on Aging. So if we're talking about some of the overlapping programs and systems, they would be an appropriate organization to reach out to talk about how they have to utilize CTCs through their contracts and what that looks like. I can help arrange that.
Anybody else have next steps they'd like to see happen to keep this on the agenda? I recognize we're fully in like an information gathering part of this exercise, but I do want to keep it going.
And we can continue to gather that information. This was a starter survey of it. We still have some
Yeah.
survey information to come back into us.
Sure.
So I'm happy to keep that going as well too, so we can bring that back in coordination with
Yes, that would
the
be-
other items as well.
I would appreciate it. Thank you again for taking.
That was the direction I was gonna go. Commissioner Smith, are we gonna follow up with the agencies that we hadn't heard from?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
And continue to still data mine of what's coming
Yep.
into it too. So this was very much a high level overview of what it is, but different ways that we can put together some of those visualizations and understanding and then getting into more of those deeper conversations is what that means and really starting to make sense of the whole system and what it could look like moving forward as well and what that requires. Because again, I recognize it sounds simple that we just need to strip, but that is no simple task coming into it. And
It doesn't look simple.
It doesn't look simple. You did a great job, though.
Yeah, we'll continue to do that one. Thank you, Commissioner.
Great. Thank you again for leading this effort. Any other comments or questions from commissioners on this topic? Okay, moving on. Adverse incident report summary. Reports of adverse incidents received by local governments or their transportation service providers are to be submitted quarterly to the commission. Adverse incident reports for the quarter of January 1 through March 31, 2025 are due no later than April 30th, 2025. Carol will now provide a summary of the reports received for the first quarter.
So this is the first quarter and we really learned a lot. A lot of the CTCs and agencies that submitted their adverse incidences submitted a lot of things, not necessarily incidences that occurred with individuals with disabilities, but more incidences that occurred to their vehicles. It was interesting to read some of them. So we had 37 agencies that reported, 10 that did not, but of those 10, we followed up and we've heard back from two additional agencies. So now that's down to 8. Basically reports, agencies that reported no incidences during the reporting period 23. Those related to vehicle incidences were 48 and then safety was 44. So a total of 708. Complaints is another breakdown. 708 complaints. The majority of those came from Broward County.
Complaints?
Complaints.
Okay.
And they were primarily complaints. And then understandably, I mean, I called and talked with them and we learned that anytime the rider was dissatisfied with the trip, be it the rider, the driver, the vehicle, the timeliness of it, the smell of it, the directions it was going on the road, those were all seen as rider complaints. They didn't want to go this way, they wanted to go that way. They thought that way was shorter.
Okay.
At that time, but which direction they were,
Wanted
the
to make
route
sure
that they were
what
taking, not that they were going the wrong way, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. That they were going a different route. So we talked with them and, they felt like those were negative experiences and they definitely were adverse to the rider, but I don't necessarily know that those were the type of events we were looking for them to report.
Was there anything that was, within or outside of we'll call it a more normal complaint or something that seemed alarming or life safety issue, things like that? Were there any of those or?
Like leaving someone in a vehicle.
So I think looking at the breakdown of it, there were 800, 7 of them were general complaints, but I also see that you put roughly 80 in the vehicle related, but 44 were safety related. So anything within those safety related instances that
Yeah, being taken to a wrong place.
have any
dropped off,
sort of
not- Yes.
conversation that we
Not
can
not
have.
necessarily taken to a wrong place. I think Monica, I know you kind of looking at them. They were more, but just complaints in general. Regarding the actual vehicle, the other passengers on the vehicle, there were, complaints of, ambient odors. We're talking of the ones, right, of that one from Broward County.
Correct.
The other, reports are more perhaps vehicle broke down, or they were in the parking lot, and as they were delivering passengers or picking passengers up, another car came by and hit their side mirror. Had a vehicle back in with a trailer hitch on the back of theirs, and it backed into the back end of the vehicle. So remember, any of those type of incidences that occur, delay the trip. Because the driver has to call that into dispatch, and then they have to send someone out to inspect, the situation, file a report, so there's documentation of that. I read some where there were passengers that became ill while on the vehicle, or they may have some situations where they were in their wheelchair on the lift. They decided themselves to move the wheelchair off the lift, either before the lift got to the ground or before the lift got into the vehicle. We had some situations where passengers in their wheelchairs fell out of the wheelchair while in transport because they didn't want to secure themselves with a seat belt or a lap belt. So there were situations like that, but there weren't any critical, we didn't have any fatalities. There were some minor car accidents, where vehicles have ran lights, not necessarily the bus, but more of another vehicle that was at the intersection ran and hit the bus. Somebody was on the vehicle, that type of thing.
So did we check with the individuals at all to see if it was their personal choice to not strap themselves in, or how do you?
Well, again, based on the directions that we were going, we were not collecting personal information. We weren't getting rider data, rider names or anything like that to do any of
I
that.
think on some of those too, though, for reporting it, there was a follow-up that the local needed to go through as well too, as to contacting them though and seeing what sort of corrective action would need to be taken behind those. Did we see anything of that or contact? So corrective action was taken as necessary and approached afterwards. Every incident.
The driver was either retrained.
Correct. Okay.
Or video was reviewed to ensure the driver, conducted themselves properly, did all the right things.
So of the 8 who have not responded, are any of those individuals you've just given grants to?
Possibly. And I don't have that list with me, I'm sorry, but, there are some, and I know that they're in the process of submitting their additional information or report.
Okay.
Yes.
Do we have any corrective action measures for when they don't submit timely?
Not at this time. Like I said, this is the first quarter. So they're all getting their feet wet on what we're looking for and when it should be due.
So is there a way to withhold their grant funding until we complete the requirements, or no?
I'm not sure. I don't know that there was any language in the legislation that gave us the authority to do that. I think they were wanting to collect the incidences to see what type of incidences first.
Okay.
But I will definitely continue to follow up with them. I think the first phase of this is to let you all know which ones did or did not report.
Yes.
In those incidents, we didn't have any definitions or examples of what incident would be considered, right?
Correct.
So we did advise as part of that too, to over-report, if you will, so that then we can see what is happening, what's not, and then start honing in on true events or incidences that needed to be addressed.
Do they have a standard form that they
Yes.
utilize and like an email, or do they
Yes.
upload it somewhere?
There is a form they have to complete, and it is attached to an email that's sent to, we have a specific email address for them to submit those incidences to. Yes.
It does it makes me feel better that that corrective action was taken on all of the ones that reported, but I do have some hesitancy with the 8 that have been non-responsive.
We'll continue to follow up with them to make sure we have them all report this quarter and then for the next quarter as well.
Okay. And I recognize there's nothing we can do now, but I would like to figure out if there are actions we can take for entities that are not responding to. So I do think I think this is important.
We can break the incidences down and give a little bit more information, a little bit more of a breakdown of those incidences for your all's information at for our next break, our next meeting.
Okay. Any other questions on this report?
Commissioner Tillis just asking about the map. Can you clarify the numbers for her benefit?
Or Commissioner Telez, will you clarify your question? What math are you?
Yeah, this is Commissioner Tellez. I think what I was looking at is when I looked at the current slide, I thought it was a total. It's not a total. The complaints. So I take back my question. Now I understand it better now.
I should have indented the word complaints as well. I'm sorry. On that
That's
chart.
okay.
I can see that confusion.
Oh, and I had another question about Broward. What's going on with Broward?
Well, because there was no definition provided, they reported to us all the complaints and incidents. They felt that complaints were incidences, so they reported all of them to us.
Oh, okay, got it.
Right.
So Broward did exactly as they were instructed to do.
Yeah, they over-reported, definitely. We've talked to them. Some of the conversation was, what do you report through your national transit database reporting? What's determined critical incident, a reportable incident to NTD, and it's more of a very safety focused type of incidents, not rider complaints. So I believe this next quarter, we will see a lot less from Broward County, more focused on some true incidences and not complaints.
Okay.
I do
thank you.
appreciate them trying to be over
reporting.
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Okay. All right. Any other questions or comments? Thank you. Now it's time for the executive director update. Karen, the floor is yours for updates on commission operations and any upcoming priorities.
I don't really have much else. I sent you all an update on the legislation. We did have a bill that passed this year that does affect the TV program. It is definitely more focused on opening up our grant program to CTCs and allowing us to contract with non-standard transportation providers that comply with our safety standards. So that'll be some new things we'll be bringing to the commission for y'all's input, guidance on how we want to move forward with that. It changed the language that previously required transportation providers or governmental agencies to provide transportation providers APD approved training. And now it says that they will be offered access to that training. So that one changed as well. And like I said, the appropriations, we're waiting to hear from the budget. All of our grants are contingent on that. And that's where we're at on the legislation. I think there was some things that passed with DOT, no, that dealt with transit.
We have a good bit with DOT, but I don't know if we have
Any transit
any
related
specific to the
Decommission body.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very good.
very exciting things happen. DOT, as always.
Yes, lots of things. We did the professional development workshop a couple of weeks ago. Commission had 2 presentations there. One was on the TD program and the other was on our annual operating report, just helping our CTCs know what to report in that, a little bit more clarification. We probably had about 50 or so attendees in our session, so it was a good turnout. We did well there. And I think that's it. We finished our quality assurance reviews, and I'll provide you with a summary of those findings at our next meeting. All 67 counties have been reviewed. This was a grant compliance review, not necessarily a complete program compliance review. So the findings were much more minimal than they have been in the past. So I think that's it for us.
Thank you. Now we will move to commissioner updates. Now I'll open the floor to commissioners for any updates, announcements, or items of interest to share with the group. If it's okay, I will start just as a friendly reminder, anybody who is required to submit their financial disclosures through the Florida Ethics Commission, those are due July 1st. So I just want to make sure everybody knew that. I always appreciate a friendly reminder on that as well. So any other commissioners have any updates, announcements, or items of interest they would like to share? Okay, so we will move to public comments. At this time, the floor is open for public comments on any topic relevant to the commission's work. Please state your name and limit your comments to 2 minutes if possible. We're going to start with those who filled out a public comment form. So Lisa Babcock, we'll see you on the screen right here. So we will recognize you first.
Thank you. Hello, everyone, and thank you to the commission for allowing me to speak. I am speaking on behalf of our chair, Karen Deagle, who could not be here today. She is the chair of FPTA, but she is also a CTC in 2 counties. At the last commission meeting, she mentioned that the board was going to establish a committee at FPTA and just kind of look at the formula that you guys have for the TD Trust Fund. It changed somewhat significantly about 5 years ago. I just wanted to give you an update that we have received information and data from Elmer, so of your staff. Thank you, Elmer. And we have yet to meet yet, but we'll be doing so soon. And hopefully at one of your future meetings, as well as our future meeting, hopefully we can give a presentation just to look at the trust fund and possibly make some future recommendations. So thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you very much. Are there any others wishing to, oh, I see, like Anne Romance?
Yes, good afternoon.
You're recognized.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Anne Romance. I'm the regional accountant for the Guidance Care Center. And I just wanted to share our thoughts on the funding and allocation method for the transportation for the trip and equipment grant. The current funding formula, the last commenter, I'm sorry, I don't remember the name, mentioned changed and now uses trips and miles from the services provided under the trip and equipment grant. And this has impacted our rural community by reducing our funding in the last several years. As you all know, we develop a rate model every year, and that covers the extras that our county has, including much higher insurance, more miles, wear and tear on the vehicles, which is exacerbated by ocean air, more time on the road, and the higher cost of living. These costs continue to increase annually and are exacerbated with construction on the roads, accidents, difficulty getting parts, and maintenance costs. Each year, the state of Florida gives us less and less funding, which means our dollars do not go as far, and this is impacting the ridership in our community. So we would definitely be interested in any changes to the allocation method and also in learning more about the mobility management that was mentioned under the survey. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Ms. Heidi Vila, are you wanting to make a public comment?
Yes, I am. Public comment is actually more of a request and a question for the scorecards for the ISD. Although everything was approved for all that had completed ISD applications to receive the full funding that they asked for. I know that MTM, the CTC for Highlands County, would really like feedback specifically of why they scored what they scored, so they can, during the year, as they're finishing this new allocation, this new award, go ahead and work on that to continue to make it better and better, to come up with a better presentation and a better application the following year. They'd like one of those sent to them so they can just get good feedback, good critical feedback.
Director, is that something, sounds like a starting of a public records request, but I don't
Yes,
know if we have records that are responsive to that. So will you work with,
I'll work with Heidi
okay,
and the CTC to provide that information.
thank you. Okay. I think it is time to adjourn. So, oh,
Can we talk about
no.
upcoming
Okay.
commission meetings?
we
Okay,
Go ahead.
go back to that other slide, please, Debbie, the one that had the dates, the possible dates. There you go. Okay. Those are the dates that I believe we're putting out there for you all for consideration. So if you could please check your calendars and give me some dates in those areas that we could schedule our next upcoming meetings. Unless you'd like to meet sooner. Just trying to do one, the last month of each quarter. We can look at other months if that's something you all want to do, but I need to.
Karen, do you want us to send you availability based on these?
Please.
That would be best. You can do that, yes.
Yes, thank you.
We'll jot those down and coordinate with you.
And I'll send an email back out to you all again with these dates. As a follow-up. Sorry, just wanted to make sure I put that out there.
Okay.
I'll send it to you.
Okay.
I will send that out to you as well.
Right.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, now to adjournment. If there's no further business, may I have a motion to adjourn?
Samantha Farren will motion.
I hear a motion and a second. All in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
Aye.
Go ahead and say that's the majority. And then, so thank you all for your time, insight, and service today. This meeting is adjourned.